Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories podcast. Okay, well, we're recording again. It's been, I think, 3 weeks since we've posted.
Yeah, it has.
I got really sick and my husband got sick. It was just a flu bug, all that kind of stuff running around. And didn't want to bring mom over to record because, you know, don't want to get her sick and and then the holiday and everything. So, but we're excited to be back. Hopefully everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Ours was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it was a good day.
It was lots of cooking and family time. But yeah, so today we've got kind of a sad, tragic story. It's the tragic murder of a North Denver girl. Her name was Theresa Spanarella. And Theresa, she was 18 years old and she was headed home from a dance on the evening of Sunday, July 20th, 1930, when she was fatally shot and killed by a gunman. But before we get into how this tragedy unfolded, let's start by diving into the family's history. So Theresa's father was born in Italy in 1877, and he arrived in America somewhere between 1905 and 1908. And Theresa's mother was Fenice Marinaro, and she was born in Italy in 1880. And so Theresa's parents, they were actually married in Italy, and they had two daughters, Isadora and Rosie, before they came to America. Once they got to America, they settled in Utah for a while and they had three more children, Theresa, John, and Caroline. And then they ended up moving to Colorado after that.
Yeah.
So, gotta love Colorado. And so they actually moved somewhere between 1917 and 1919. And they had their last two kids, Louis and Tony, after they moved to Colorado. So Theresa's father, Sam, was a shoemaker. He actually worked out of his home repairing shoes, and he had a contract with Panco Tops and Pancord Hills.
Never heard of either.
I haven't either. I searched that up in like newspapers and the Colorado historical newspapers, and I saw some advertisements for it.
Oh,
but wow. I've never heard of it before. And it's cool that he got to work out of his home. He probably had like a shop in the backyard or something. Yeah. So getting back to Theresa, she was born in July of 1913, and she was the third oldest. She had grown up in the heart of Denver's Little Italy on Navajo Street. She was working at the Columbine Laundry, and people described Theresa as a local beauty in the Italian colony. And Theresa was also very involved in the Mount Carmel Church. She was a member of the St. Cecilia organization at Mount Carmel. She had a lot of friends in the Little Italy, and she was Mount Carmel was a big part of her life. And we'll actually see that later on in some of the testimony that comes in.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So she was well known in the community, I guess, is kind of where I was going with that. So
yeah, and being that age, she was really involved at 18. That's
yeah, exactly.
A lot of people at that age aren't.
No, they're kind of trying to do their own thing and figure out life. Yeah. But before we get too far into this incident, we do need to stop and talk about Theresa's sister, Rosie, because she and her husband, Alex, play a large part in this story. So Rosie, she was born in Italy in 1905, and she was the second oldest. In 1925, she married Alex English in Golden, Colorado, and they had 3 children together. And so Golden is a little west of Denver.
Yeah, probably 20 miles.
20 miles, yeah. So not too far. Now, Alex's real name was Alessandro Inglese, and his name was changed when he went through Ellis Island because Inglese, that's English in Italian. And so, yeah, so it just got changed to Alex English. And so he was born in Italy in 1896, and he immigrated to New York in 1913. He stayed in New York for a while before coming to Colorado. And he actually had family that settled in Montrose, Colorado. They were farmers and had a ranch. And Montrose is on the western side of Colorado in the area Mom and I live.
Yeah, Montrose is about 55 miles south of Grand Junction.
It's a bigger town now, but it's still probably considered a small town. But back in the early 1900s, it was all farming community. So it might be worth looking into one day for me to see how many Italians immigrated to Montrose. Right, yeah. You just don't think of that.
No.
It's so small. But Alex, he did eventually move to Denver. And before he married Rosie in 1925, he actually married a Florence Esposita in Denver in 1915. But they were divorced in 1924, so a year before he married Rosie. And
No children and out of that.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think they had any children, not that I could find. But let's go back now to the night of Sunday, July 20th, 1930, when Theresa was killed.
And that's when she was leaving the dance.
Leaving the dance hall. Yep, exactly. And she was actually with her younger sister, Caroline. They were both at a dance that was being held at Elitch's amusement park. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you're in Denver area, that's our...
Right.
Yeah. And so for those of you that aren't from the Denver area, that's like the big amusement park in Denver.
Right.
So I'm not even sure. I think it's a Six Flags. Is it Six Flags now? I mean, it will always be Elitch's.
Right.
But I think officially it's a Six Flags.
Yeah, probably is when they moved. And I think you're right. It probably is Elitch's Six Flags.
Okay, so yeah, Six Flags. It looks like Six Flags and Elitch's are the same thing. But if you're from Denver, it'll always be Elitch's.
Right,
Kind of like Mile High Stadium, the Denver Broncos will always be Mile High.
Right.
I don't even know what it is now officially. It's all they changed the name of the stadium, but it's always Mile High.
Maybe Empower.
Maybe Empower. So it's kind of funny. So Caroline and Theresa, they left the dance, and the two were standing at an intersection waiting to cross the street when shots were fired, and unfortunately, Theresa was shot. So two men, John Rickhart and Joseph Clark, and Rickhart's wife, they were actually driving in a car when Theresa was shot, and they probably heard it and then saw Theresa fall. And so the two men, they actually spotted the man who shot Theresa, and they got out of the car and took off after him. And so when the men caught up to the shooter, they grabbed him by the arm to stop him. And the shooter turned around and shoved the gun into Rickhart's ribs and said, quote, "I gave the girl 3 shots and I have 3 more for you. So get the hell away from me."
Wow.
So Rickhart and Clark, they obviously let go of the gunman and they ran off to hide because the gunman actually started firing at them.
Yep.
So the two men, they were later interviewed by police, and they said that they saw Theresa and her sister waiting at the corner, and they said all of a sudden Theresa, she started running and a man was chasing her, and the man shot her and she fell in the road. So the ambulance and police were called, and Theresa, she was taken to the Denver General Hospital where she died shortly after arriving. The police, they also questioned Caroline, Theresa's sister who was with her, and she dropped quite the bombshell on them. She told the police that the man who shot her was Alex English. And remember, Alex was married to their sister Rosie.
Rosie, yeah.
So that's quite scandalous, I guess you could say.
That's interesting. Because they're still married, right?
They're still married at this time, yep. And so Caroline told the police officers that her and Theresa were transferring streetcars so that they could get home when Alex all of a sudden approached them. But she said that they noticed earlier in the night that Alex was actually following them. So they spotted him in the park watching them as they left the dance. And Caroline said it really basically freaked them out. So they were kind of just hurrying to get home. And she said that she thinks Alex followed them in his car. So right off the bat, I mean, they're freaked out just by seeing him in the park. Like,
yeah,
this
their
is
brother-in-law following them around.
It's not normal. And so, of course, Caroline, she's obviously so upset and said that she regretted not taking a ride from 2 of their friends. So I guess when they started walking home, 2 Italian boys that were from the neighborhood, Roxy and James, they pulled over and asked them if they wanted a ride. But the girls said that they were okay and they were just going to head home. So obviously, after the whole incident happened, Caroline's, thinking like, oh my gosh, we should have took that. Why didn't we take that ride? The boys are probably leaving the dance too, would be my guess. Yeah. So when the police went to inform Theresa's parents of her death, her mother collapsed and needed medical attention right away.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
Horrible situation. You think your daughters are just at a dance at an amusement park and all this news comes to your front door. It's terrible.
Because it's not that far from where they live. That was up on 38th and Tennyson where Elitch's is.
Oh, that's where Elitch's was? So, yeah, and they were on Navajo. So
38th and Navajo.
Right there, yep. And so the family, they were able to tell the police that Alex, they knew he was jealous of Theresa and hated her going to the dances, and at one point even threatened Theresa if she went to another dance. He would, I don't really know what his threat was, if he would hurt her but he threatened her. And so the family said that they couldn't explain why Alex felt this way. However, the paper, it was not exactly friendly towards the family. So as I'm reading this take it with a grain of salt, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Why does he think that he has a position to tell her what to do when she's 18 and he's just the brother-in-law?
Exactly.
And what's his wife, their sister, think?
In this part right here with the family is like, oh yeah, we knew that he had these problems and this jealousy of Theresa, but it really, like we don't really know why. And the paper kind of made it sound like they were, I'm just going to say this, and this is not my opinion, this is just how I feel like the paper made it out, that the family was kind of stupid. Oh, we don't know why he was so jealous and hated her. Ignorant in a way.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's not my opinion. That's just kind of how the paper portrayed their family.
I gotcha.
Because it explained the interview with the family and the police by saying, quote, excitable temperament of the Italian family made it difficult for the police to get a connected story. From their incoherent statements, however, the police gathered that English had threatened Theresa with death if she persisted in attending dances.
That's interesting that the paper would write that. This is all going off of the interview of her parents.
Yes.
So they were probably very
emotional.
Right.
Yeah. They were probably a wreck. And, and so they might have been saying like, yes, we knew he had these issues and he was jealous of her, but they're probably saying like, we never thought it would come to this.
Right.
But the way the paper portrayed it was just, it irked me, I guess. Is what
and
I'm
maybe
saying.
They didn't understand him if they didn't speak fluent English.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there was that loss in the translation kind of thing.
You never know with papers.
You don't. It's so hard. So Theresa's funeral was held the following Wednesday at her home, and she was buried at Mount Olivet Cemetery. And Theresa's close friends were the pallbearers. They were Della Cavara, Helen D'Amore, Francis Sidio, Eleanor Janico, and Anna and Angelina Corbetta, which we have some relations to the Corbettas. Yeah. So it's either Corbetta or Carabetta.
That's right.
Yeah, because Carabetta, I think they changed the spelling later on. So those were the pallbearers at her funeral. And at first the police were not sure if Alex was actually the killer. He was definitely a top suspect, but the police, they needed to talk to him and to be sure if
They haven't confronted him yet?
They hadn't confronted him yet because they were having trouble finding him.
Oh.
So somehow they found out that Alex was in Pueblo, Colorado, and that's in South Colorado. And he took off actually that same night that Theresa was killed. And the Denver police contacted the Pueblo police, and he was actually arrested as he got off the train in Pueblo. And so he was immediately sent back to Denver to be questioned by the police. And I guess he was going down there to stay with a friend. So I don't know how they found out he was headed to Pueblo, but they figured it out somehow.
Well, that's good.
And Alex, he admitted to the police that he shot Theresa twice in the head. He said the reason was because he disapproved of the dances that Theresa went to. But he said what really upset him was when Theresa would ask Rosie, her sister, his wife, to go to the dances with her. He said when Rosie would tell Theresa that she couldn't go, Theresa would apparently tell her that, she needs to leave Alex and move back in with her family. Then Alex would say to Theresa to stay away from Rosie. And so this, of course, caused a lot of tension, and the whole situation would just be filled with tension, basically.
Oh, okay. I get that, but I still don't get
the jealousy.
Right.
Yeah. And we'll get into it here in a little bit, but it's just a weird situation. So Alex said the night of the shooting, he approached Theresa and told him to stay out of his family's affairs. And apparently Theresa cursed at him, and this just infuriated Alex, who then decided that he would take vengeance on Theresa, and he followed the girls that night. So I guess he hit his breaking point, but still it's like not justification for what he does.
Right.
So he told the police that when he shot her, he didn't mean to kill her and was shocked that she was dead. If you're chasing her with a gun and you shoot the gun, what do you think could happen,
And he knew he shot her in the head.
Exactly. So he also said that he needed to shoot her, though, because she was an evil influence over his children and his wife. So he's all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't mean to shoot. I didn't mean to kill her. Exactly. You took the gun and you followed her. He said that after he shot her, he threw the gun over the bridge and fled to Pueblo. And so the Denver Post, they actually interviewed Alex, and he told them that he knew he was going to be hanged for murdering Theresa. And poor Rosie, she was distraught over this whole situation. If you think about her position she's in right now, the father of her children, her husband, killed her sister.
Right.
Like, how do you even begin to wrap your mind around that? Right. Actually, Rosie and her 3 children, they stayed with her parents after this incident. And, I think she just didn't want to be alone. Right. So
just moved back in with them.
Exactly. And so Rosie, she did speak with the police, and she told them that she doesn't know why Alex killed her sister. She said she was always faithful to him, but she doesn't understand why Alex always told her sister not to go to dances or to talk to other men. So there's another layer to this.
Yeah.
It's weird. She said she would always tell Alex that Theresa was none of his business, which is, she's not his business. She's an 18-year-old girl.
Right. Yeah. I get Alex, not appreciating her trying to convince her sister, his wife,
sure,
to constantly be going out
to dances and stuff. Yeah. And so Rosie, she even said that Alex would get upset if Rosie gave Theresa gifts. Apparently, one time Rosie gave Theresa a watch as a gift, and Alex found out about it and demanded that Rosie get the watch back. Like, why do you care? Weird. Yeah. So she said her and Alex were constantly fighting over issues like this. Rosie said that after he killed Theresa and ditched the gun, he actually came home and demanded that she give him all the money that was in the house. He told Rosie that he had to go away for a while, but would not tell her where or why. And so she said they obviously had a big fight over this because he wanted the $55 that was in the house. So obviously he got the $55 and took off to Pueblo, but she was mad and confused over this. Like, why are you?
Yeah, because at this point she didn't know.
She had no idea. And so he just came home and said, I need that money. But about a week after Theresa's death, Alex's lawyers entered a plea of not guilty by insanity on behalf of Alex for murder in the first degree.
Yeah, it was all premeditated.
Exactly.
Insane.
He got in the car and followed them with a gun. Right. So because of this, the judge ordered Alex to be sent to a hospital for 10 to 30 days for a mental evaluation. And he stayed in the hospital until August 16th of 1930. And if we go back, let's see, she was shot on July 20th of 1930. So he stayed.
Oh, so it's right at a month.
Right about a month, maybe a week short of a month. So the trial, it was set for October 6th, but when October came around, Alex's attorney asked for more time and the trial was delayed until October 20th. So the judge and Alex's lawyers, they were still trying to determine Alex's mental state during October. And because of this, the trial was pushed out even further to October 27th. So that's hard. I always feel bad for families, the victim's family, because when the trials get pushed out, that's got to be so horrible.
Oh, I know.
But when the trial started on October 27th, the court, they had an interpreter brought in since there were so many witnesses called whose main language was Italian. And on the 27th, the lawyers, they started interviewing potential jurors. And the defense attorneys, they were claiming that Alex was insane at the time of the murder and questioned the jurors on their thoughts and knowledge regarding insanity. And the prosecution, they said that they were seeking the death penalty, so they questioned the jurors on how they felt about the death penalty. During all of this questioning, the paper reported that Alex just sat emotionless and hardly moved while the attorneys questioned the potential jurors. And the papers described Alex as looking to be about 50 years old, even though he was only 34. And the reporter said his hair was gray, he was stout and emotionless. But I mean, when you do something like that, you could age pretty bad overnight. Yeah. So the prosecuting attorneys also said that they believed the motive was jealousy. They thought that Theresa had turned down Alex's advances towards her, and this infuriated him.
That sounds more like it.
I agree, because like you said, I can understand him being irritated if Theresa's always like, hey, come to this dance with us, because those are single things. But this feels more like what he was really upset about. And so the prosecution said that they didn't believe Alex's confession. Now, they did believe that Alex killed Theresa, but they thought he was lying about why he killed her, which that's kind of what we just talked about. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Right. So if you hear in the background, if you hear little dog collars or dogs, we're actually recording at Mom's house today. My husband has a whole game thing going on at our house, and so I brought the dogs, but they are not wanting to leave us alone while we record. So if you hear like a dog collar jingle, that's what that is. So the prosecution, they actually believed that he was obsessed with her and finally snapped after she had continuously turned him down. And the prosecution told the Denver Post, quote, "We expect to show that English had been married before, that he was divorced, We also expect to show that he frequently quarreled with the parents of his sister-in-law, who were especially fond of her. On several occasions, we will seek to prove English tried to make dates with Miss Spanarella and failed. He made several proposals to her and quarreled with her frequently because she desired to go out with boys of her own age. That was what the prosecution said.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, because to be jealous, and even that quote that Rosie said is the thing that always sticks with me. Theresa is none of your business. For the wife to say that,
right,
tells you that she was constantly in his head, you know?
And they're right too, because he was married once before, and this is way back. I mean, I know people divorced back then,
but not as frequent as now.
Right. And so probably the same thing.
And you're actually spot on, because his ex-wife is one of the witnesses, and she has some things to say about him. So you are on the right track there. So by October 29th, the jury was complete and the trial was moving forward. And one of the first witnesses to take the stand was Caroline. So remember, Caroline is Theresa's sister that went to the dance with her that night. Yeah. So she was with her when she was killed. And the Rocky Mountain News described Caroline as, quote, the most dramatic witness to appear in a murder trial in Denver in years. So during her time on the stand, she cried. She gave, quote, a tongue lashing to Alex's lawyers.
Oh, my.
And apparently gave the stare to many people in the courtroom. And they just put it in quotes, the stare. So I think she meant business when she got up there. So her testimony, one of the first questions asked by the prosecution was for Caroline to identify the clothing that Theresa was wearing the night she was killed. This is the heartbreaking part of her testimony, because as soon as she saw Theresa's white hat with a flower and a bullet hole in it, she completely lost it. In fact, she had to be removed from the courtroom for a short time. And when she came back, she was able to identify the hat and clothing as belonging to Theresa.
That's sad.
Yeah, that's terrible. I mean, it's just, especially the bullet hole in it. It's like, my goodness.
Yeah.
So after this, Caroline was described as, quote, having tears in her eyes, and at other times her black eyes blazed fiery resentment at the chief defense lawyer. And on several occasions, she gave the attorney tongue lashings despite all the efforts of the judge and prosecutors to prevent her. She was up there to give her peace of mind. So apparently, Caroline, she would fire back at the defense attorney so hard that the courtroom at times would laugh, and the judge would threaten to clear the courtroom. But the best part was how she glared at Alex while she was on the stand. When they asked her if she knew the defendant, she yelled, "Yes, I do," and stared at him with an accusing glare.
That's what I would have been doing too.
Me too, just staring him down. And so she went on to testify and retell the events of the night to the attorneys. So Caroline's testimony, it offered a lot more details to how the events unfolded that night. So she said that Alex actually followed them to the dance and offered to stay with them, almost like escorting them to watch over them. But I guess Caroline and Theresa both told him, no, we don't need you here. You need to leave. Like, you're 34, we're 18. And I think Caroline, she was only like 16 at this point. So it's like, you don't need to be here. It's probably a dance for teenagers. Weirdo.
Yeah, he doesn't want his wife to go anywhere.
Yes.
But he's out roaming around, following girls around.
Exactly. Yeah. Talk about the hypocrisy there. And so she said after they left the dance, they were offered a ride by two boys that they knew, James and Roxy. We talked about them earlier. And after the girls told them that they were okay, they were just going to walk home, Alex apparently approached them again. So Theresa yelled at Alex at this point and told him, quote, "Get away from me. You hit my mother and call me bad names."
Oh, wow.
So that's an interesting statement.
Right.
You hit my mother. Unfortunately, I don't know the background or the history on that statement, but kind of speaks volumes right there.
Right.
And I guess Alex tried to even give the girls money, but Theresa said they have enough money to get home and they don't want a ride from him. And Caroline said that Alex then yelled back at Theresa and said, "Well, if you won't talk to me, there'll be some shooting tonight. And wherever you stop, then I'll stop." And Caroline said then he then pulled his gun and showed it to them. And I don't know if apparently the girls took off running at that point or if Alex took off. I'm not sure what happened, but she then went on to describe the moment that Alex chased down Theresa and shot her. And I'm not going to retell that part, but.
Right. Okay. So the boys that offered her a ride, then Alex came back and told them this.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So I think how it went down was the girls went to the dance and Alex showed up there and said, hey, I'll stay with you and
Right.
escort you or whatever. And they were like, no, get out of here. And I think he left, but I think he waited outside the dance. And then I think Theresa and Caroline left, and those two boys, James and Roxy, my guess were they were at the dance,
Right.
and said, hey, you guys want to ride home? And Alex was probably watching or listening to all of this, and they said, no, we're good. And then Alex approached and said, well, I'll give you a ride home.
Okay.
And they were like, definitely no, not from you. And then that exchange happened, and then he followed them because they said they were taking streetcars home. So then I think he followed in his car at every streetcar stop.
Oh, okay.
Creep. So after Caroline's testimony, several others were called to testify. And it was, the two men that went after Alex, the two boys who offered a ride to the girls, and others who were on the street and witnessed the shooting. But we talked about Alex's first wife earlier. She actually took the stand and claimed that Alex was an unwell man. And her name was Florence. I think we talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
And she said that the day after they were married, he accused her of being intimate with another man.
There's the jealousy.
Exactly. It's the day after they're married. And so she also said that his behavior, it was hard to predict at times. She said that he would be really sweet to her one minute and then the next be a quote, complete animal. And that's how she put it, was complete animal. She said that he would tell her that their children weren't his and that she always had men at the house. So that answers our question earlier about the children. They did have children. So he's obviously had some major jealousy problems.
Right.
I mean, it shows that it's a pattern, even with his first wife.
Exactly.
She also said that he was physically abusive as well, which, I mean, that's not really surprising.
No, Theresa said he hit her mom.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. Gosh, what a crazy statement to say, right? Like, how did that incident even happen where you hit your mother-in-law? My goodness. So the defense attorney worked really hard during the trial to convince the jury that Alex has always suffered from mental problems. The attorney actually traced Alex's life all the way back to his childhood in Italy, where he said he suffered from hallucinations as a child. I'm not sure how he verified that, but
Right.
I mean, Alex just said he suffered from hallucinations.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, just going off of his word, I guess. Kind of a weird statement. And doesn't make sense.
It's a lawyer.
It's a lawyer, exactly. Yep.
There's no way to prove it. It's in Italy.
And the medical records then, like how would you even begin to find those? So the defense attorney even said that Alex said his kids with his second wife were not his. And this, to me, seemed like a strange thing coming from the defense attorney. I mean, he's supposed to be defending Alex at this point. But I think what he's doing is he's trying to prove an insanity claim for Alex. So he's trying to prove like, look, he's always been this way. He's got a mental illness or whatever. Alex's attorney also pointed out that he feels that Alex kind of just hit his breaking point the day of the shooting because he said Alex found $180 rolled up and placed in a trunk in his bedroom. And when he asked his kids about it, not his wife, his kids, they said that it was Theresa's money. And Alex apparently immediately thought that his wife, Rosie, and Theresa were planning Rosie's escape from him. So I guess he thought like, they're hoarding this money so that way Rosie can leave me. It's just kind of funny that thinking though, because it's like, why would they hide it in your bedroom? Why wouldn't Theresa hold on to it if they were doing that?
Kids know whose money it is.
And I wondered, I guess I thought it was weird that he went and asked the kids, but maybe he...
Well, yeah, his wife's not going to tell truth.
Him. And so he thought that the kids would tell the truth. Yeah. So I don't know. But I guess no matter how much Rosie told him that this wasn't true, he just didn't believe her. So Rosie, she even got on the stand and testified. And so remember, this is Theresa's sister, Alex's wife. I can't even imagine how she had to feel at this point. So when the prosecutor asked her how she felt about her husband, she said that she loved him. And I guess the people in the courtroom gasped at this statement. And I mean, I kind of feel for Rosie here because she's probably dealing with a lot of emotions and she might have even been thinking, well, yeah, I loved him. He was the father of my kids, So Rosie's mother at this point was so upset that she had to go home.
She probably knew what was going on in that home.
True. Well, even after, because, Rosie moved back in. So after the after Theresa was killed. So, it might have been like a cathartic thing. Like when she moved back in with her parents, she might have opened up the floodgates and said like, this is who he is. And this is what he's been doing. Like, this is what I lived through. And so maybe you're right. Maybe Rosie's mom did know at that point. Just a messy situation. This poor family. So the papers, they even came out though, and they said that Rosie, she completely sided with her husband and agreed with everything he said about Theresa. I don't know. I have trouble believing this because so with all the other testimonies, the paper had details and quotes from that person's testimony. But with Rosie's, there were no specific details. It was just like Rosie agreed with her husband, sided with her husband. Where like with Caroline, they had quotes in the paper of this is what she said. They didn't have that with Rosie. So there was no real specific details. The paper just said she sided with her husband. So I don't know. Like I said, I have a little bit of trouble believing that.
Yeah, that sounds more like their opinion.
That's what I was thinking too, because if they don't have any specific quote. Exactly, to back up like so Rosie completely sided with her husband because she said this and then add a quote in. They didn't have that where they had it with other people's testimonies, but not with Rosie. So I don't know if this is like hey, let's put this crazy headline on there and so people keep reading the paper. I don't know. Just a little weird. So a doctor at the hospital where Theresa passed away, he took the stand and he said that he heard Rosie say that Alex was crazy and he needed to hang for what he did to Theresa. So see, this is where my doubt is because the paper quotes this doctor saying, I heard Rosie say this, but they don't quote Rosie saying that she sides with her husband. So that's where I kind of doubt it. Alex's attorney's plea for insanity, it was turned down and the courts deemed that Alex was sane of mind during the incident. And 2 doctors overruled one doctor who said that Alex was insane. So they had 3 doctors that evaluated him and 2 doctors said that he was sane and 1 doctor said no. The trial, it ended on November 1st after the jury deliberated for 5 hours and the jury came back with a guilty verdict and sentenced Alex to death. His attorneys, though, they immediately filed an appeal and wanted a new trial. And so after this verdict, Alex was taken to prison and he went on a hunger strike to protest his death penalty conviction. He would yell things like, I won't eat this food. It has powdered glass in it. So I don't know. It's like, all right, don't eat then. Who cares? Whatever. And so the guards reported that Alex would scream, I didn't mean to kill her, and that he would beat his head against the prison bars. Then after a while, he also went on a no talking strike. And I'm sure the guards were like, woohoo! And so I don't know what he thought he was going to accomplish with all of this. He did say that he wanted to die, but not by hanging. So I don't know if he just thought he'd silence himself and starve himself to death. I don't know. I don't know. So they did end up moving Alex to solitary confinement and the guards, they took his belt from him and anything else that he could use to harm himself. So the warden told the papers that if he continued his hunger strike, they would force feed him with tubes. And the guards, I guess they would have to check on him every 15 minutes to make sure he was okay. So after 100 hours of being on a hunger strike, Alex gave in and started eating again. Wow. And the guards said, surprisingly, his mood improved after he ate.
Funny.
I know. So in late November of 1930, Alex's attorneys, they motioned for a new trial. And after initially being denied, Alex would eventually be granted a second trial in 1932. So it took a little while, but he got another trial. So, but we're going to back up just a little bit because there's kind of an interesting thing that happens in January of 1931 in Colorado. So the state of Colorado, they rushed a bill through the Colorado General Assembly to abolish the death penalty in Colorado. And there was actually a group called the Colorado League to Abolish Capital Punishment that was trying hard to save the lives of 4 men that were sentenced to die in the state of Colorado. And Alex was one of these men. So the group was pretty sure it would get approved because the governor at that time, Governor Adams, he was very much against the death penalty. However, the bill never passed and Alex, he was sentenced to hang on April of 1931. But because he was granted a second trial, the death sentence was obviously postponed. And here's kind of a funny story. In October of 1931, while Alex was in jail awaiting his second trial, some inmates broke out of prison and Alex, he was not included in this whole scheme to break out. But when the guards did a thorough search of all the inmates, they found sleeping pills and a gold watch on Alex. And the guards confiscated the items since they were not allowed in prison. So Alex was just kind of hanging out in his cell with his sleeping pills and his watch, and everybody's trying to break out of prison, and he has no idea what's going on, but he got, they obviously
sleeping pills.
too many. Yeah, exactly. He probably slept through the whole thing. So then a couple months later, in December of 1931, the Colorado State Supreme Court, they actually reversed the death penalty on Alex, stating that the doctor at the mental hospital gave false statements. So,
wow.
Yeah. So basically he went from, a death penalty sentence to life in prison at that point, but he's still awaiting his trial for 1932. And oddly, that same month in December of 1931, Alex was committed to the hospital again for evaluation because his second trial was set for February 12th, 1932. And so with all these false statements coming in and they weren't sure if they could believe the previous doctors, they were like, we need to get a new evaluation done before this new trial.
Oh, okay.
So they sent him to a hospital to be evaluated. And when his evaluation came back, Alex was deemed sane again. So with that, the second trial began. And this is in February of 1932. And pretty much the same witnesses testified in the trial. And as the trial went on, the defense came forward and said that they found new evidence in the case against Alex. And they said that they have actual evidence that Theresa was actually killed in a crossfire between Alex and two other men. So they said that because of this, Alex shouldn't be charged with first-degree murder, but manslaughter instead.
But he said he killed her.
He admitted the first time he killed her. There's also witnesses, those two men that were in the car.
Yeah.
They said they saw him chase her and shoot her. So this just feels like a
set up.
Yeah, like kind of like a last straw, like, hey, let's just see if this sticks. And so the defense said that they had witnesses that could come forward and corroborate this story. Surprisingly, though, these witnesses never showed. So
I was just going to say, well, where are they?
Yeah, exactly. So then they tried saying that Alex's revolver was a 25 caliber, but Theresa was killed by a 38 caliber. You think they would have figured this all out
in the first
trial? Like, we didn't know what kind of caliber she was killed by. Again, I think they're just throwing out, they got their second trial. So,
yeah.
And I think they were betting that his evaluation
sanity
would come back as he was deemed insane, but it came back sane. So I think at that point they were scrambling and they're like, let's throw in these other shooters and this gun thing. So now when it was Rosie's turn to testify in the second trial, she was so nervous that she actually fainted outside of the courtroom, but she was able to eventually get on the stand, and her testimony, it was basically the same as her first testimony. At Alex's second trial, history was actually made because for the first time in Colorado history, a Catholic nun appeared as a witness in court.
Oh, wow.
So remember how we were talking about how Theresa was very involved with Mount Carmel. So Sister Emziana, she was the superior at Mount Carmel Church, and she was there to testify as a character witness for Theresa. So she said that Theresa was a student at the school and attended regular classes. She also said that Theresa's reputation was stellar at the school, at the church, and within the community. So the history was made. First Catholic nun to testify in a Colorado trial.
Pretty neat.
Yeah. So on April 13th, 1932, the jury reached a verdict in the second trial, and he was guilty on first-degree murder, and Alex was again sentenced to death. Because remember that they tried to get the death penalty.
Oh, but that didn't pass.
It didn't pass. So the death penalty was still in Colorado at this time. So as Alex was let out of the courtroom, he started yelling that he didn't do it and that some gangster killed her. I mean, it's just all over the place. He's just grabbing at straws at this point. So Alex's attorneys, they immediately said that they would file a motion for a new trial. This motion would ultimately be denied, and he was sentenced to die on July 24th, 1932. But with the denial of a new trial, Alex's attorneys appealed again to the Colorado State Supreme Court. And by the time he was set to be executed, they had to extend it because the Colorado Supreme Court had not yet ruled on the appeal. And this is just so...
This just keeps going on and on. That's after 2 trials proved guilty.
Exactly. It's crazy. And you have to think about, like, Theresa's family is probably like, this is never going to end. So, and as crazy as it sounds, in April of 1933, the Colorado State Supreme Court said that there was an error regarding Alex's sanity in his second trial, and he was granted a third trial.
Good grief.
So they just keep going back to the doctor's evaluation, this is the second time that it's failed, I guess you could say. And that's why he keeps getting these trials. So this third trial, it was set for September 12th, 1933. But in August of 1933, Alex, he tried to commit suicide by pulling out a nail from a bench in the cafeteria. And he took the nail to his cell and stabbed it into his arm. And a guard discovered him and he was sent to the hospital to recover. But after a short stay, he was sent back to the county jail and stayed there waiting for his third murder trial. And so August was a rough month for Alex. When he got back to the jail, he created, I guess you could say, a small disturbance within the jail. Alex apparently threw a bowl of oatmeal against the window. And when the guards tried to figure out who out of the 75 inmates were responsible, Alex wouldn't fess up and the other inmates got mad. So it created this like big, I don't want to say fight, but probably got a little unruly.
Oh, I'm
sure. So the guards put all the inmates into solitary confinement and they were let out when Alex finally admitted he threw the oatmeal. So all these other inmates were put in solitary confinement because he wouldn't confess.
Yeah.
So I'm sure when he got out of solitary confinement, they probably weren't very nice to him.
Yeah, I'm sure. What is he trying to do? Prove that he's insane?
Well, it's funny that you said that because people started speculating that this behavior was to garner sympathy for his court trial.
Right.
And again, prove that he was mentally ill, basically. So, but when the trial started in September, the prosecutors noticed that evidence was missing from the case file. I know this is just
keeps going on.
It's just chaos. It's crazy.
Somebody's on his side.
No doubt, right? So the clothing and hat that Theresa was wearing the night she was killed was gone, and they were having no luck finding these items. And this actually caused the trial to be delayed for a while. Again, her poor family. But luckily they were eventually able to find the clothing and the trial resumed in October. I guess they found it in a vault at the county clerk's office. Apparently it got mixed up with some other evidence but somebody found it, thank goodness. So for the third trial, they had, again, the same people testify that testified in the first two. But one thing that was different was the defense didn't bring up the whole, somebody else shot Theresa in crossfire. So it's like, at this point, your credibility is kind of gone.
Right.
You didn't bring it up in the first one. You brought it up in the second one. Now you're just leaving it out in the third one. It's just so ridiculous. But on October 25th, 1933, the jury came back with a verdict of guilty for second-degree murder. So, yeah, what this basically means is he would be spared the death penalty, but he would get anywhere from 10 years to life. So I don't know. And Theresa's family, they were really upset over this verdict. And as they were leaving the courthouse, Theresa's mom, she got into a verbal fight with some of Alex's relatives. Apparently his relatives had made some sort of a comment about Theresa, and this upset her mother. So, and Alex was reported to say, quote, "Gee, that's fine. I feel great. I'll sure sleep tonight," as he was leaving the courtroom. What a jerk. Oh, Lord.
Oh, geez.
So
this is twisted crazy.
It is. It's just, it just reminds me of chaos. It's
Right.
just a mess. So on October 31st, the judge sentenced Alex to 10 years. He got the minimum sentence.
Oh, good grief.
Can you imagine? I mean, he's gone from the death penalty to life in prison to 10 years.
And his attorneys haven't proven any difference from any of the trials.
Yeah, they haven't been able to bring up anything credible to show he wasn't responsible or
Right.
to show that he was insane at the time.
Right. Huh.
So not only was Theresa's family upset about this sentencing, but a lot of the jurors were too. So I think what they had at that moment was regret that they did the second degree verdict, because they thought that Alex would at least get 25 years. And a lot of the jurors came forward and were like, "Oh my gosh, we feel horrible. We were not expecting 10 years. We thought he'd at least get 25. And so...
But why would they even come up with that?
I wonder if the prosecuting attorneys threw that out there because maybe they thought that it would stick. Sometimes I think they give options, you could do a first degree, you could do a second degree, and maybe the prosecutors were like, we could probably get a second degree murder conviction to stick.
Because they keep getting another trial.
Exactly. And so maybe the jurors were like, okay, well, let's do the second degree murder because that might actually hold. But then when the judge came back and gave him 10 years, a lot of the jurors just felt horrible.
That's crazy.
But even crazier, Alex, he could actually be released in less than 5 years because he'd already served time in prison. So at this point, Alex had been in prison for 3 years and 3 months. So if he behaved, he had the chance to be released in about 5 years. So that would only be
Wow.
about 8 years, but he could, if he had good behavior, he could have 2 years taken off of his sentence. So you're talking 5 years, he could be released.
Oh, man.
Sickening.
Yeah.
So, of course, this was just another hard blow for Theresa's family to take. They had been through 3 trials at this point. They'd gone through so much drama, and now the man who killed Theresa could be released in less than 5 years. So, but after a few days after the sentencing, the guards at the county jail where Alex was being held before being sent to the state prison, they heard that there were rumors of mob justice out in the community. So, people were not happy.
Right.
The thought of him being released in 5 years. So a lot of the members of North Denver / Little Italy, who knew Theresa, were talking about going to the county jail and taking justice into their own hands. So because of this, Alex was immediately transferred to the state prison, and he was taken there in the middle of the night. And with this, Alex started serving his prison term. So Theresa's family at this point, they had to start moving forward. What do you do? There's nothing you can do at this point.
It's over now.
The following year, in 1934, Caroline, she married, and the couple, they lived in Denver and had at least 1 child, and she lived until 2000. So
Oh, wow.
she lived a long life. In 1937, Rosie, she was finally granted a divorce from Alex, and she remarried in 1937, and they also lived the rest of their lives in Denver. And Rosie, she passed away in 2000 as well, too. So Theresa's mother, she passed away in 1958, and Theresa's father, he passed away in 1959. But as for Alex, he was released from prison before his 10-year prison sentence was up. I'm not sure exactly when he was released, but I did find his World War II draft card, which was dated 1942, and he was actually living in Massachusetts. So he was definitely released before 1942.
Well, at least he didn't go back.
And he died in Massachusetts in 1970. So, but like you said, at least, I don't know if he had a relationship with his children or if they just were completely separate. I have no idea. But
Yeah.
And I never found anything on him, whether he remarried or committed another crime. So who knows what he was up to for those many years.
And he died in 70, so he wasn't that old because everybody else was dying in 2000.
That's true. Yeah. Because he was, when was he born? He was born in the late 1800s. I think he was a little bit older than Rosie.
Okay, so he was older. Then.
Yeah. He was born in 1896. So he was 74.
74.
It's sad. Theresa had 18 years and he had 74 years.
Right.
Crazy. I don't know. But that is the sad and tragic story of Theresa Spanarella.
Very interested, twisted, sad story.
Chaos. It's just, I keep going back to
I
that
guess
word.
More chaos than twisted.
Well, no, you're right, though. Twisted, because it's every time you turn around, something different is happening and they're throwing out something else. So,
yeah.
But we'll post some pictures up of, there's some interesting pictures of the case and the courtroom and stuff. And if you would like to, please subscribe, rate, and follow our podcast. And we hope you enjoyed listening to the tragic story of Theresa Spanarella. And we hope you come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. See you next time.
See you next time.